Hi everybody, I'm Steve and this is Apocalypse Tech on YouTube and the Signs Watcher on Rumble. Now this video is The End Really Is Near Part 2. The main body of this video was done about 8 months ago with the original Part 1. It's just that now that some time has gone by and we have been able to fill in a few more signs, I have to come in and take part of this, the end of this off. Nothing really changed, but more information has come to light. So I wanted to do a part 3.
Now your God knows what you're doing.
Now, if you remember from part 1, we had just completed the Revelation 17 beast, and we're coming up to a lot more signs. And for those of you who wonder about the placement of some of my things, like already having trumpets when I don't have any seals opened yet, well then why is the fall of Babylon announced in Revelation 14 when we don't even read about it until Revelation 17? So Revelations is kind of like that. It's, you know, it's kind of difficult to pick and choose and follow, but you know, once you get a story going, you can kind of find your way. So in this video, you're going to be able to see the fundamental transformation of my Revelation 17 beast.
You stole, you get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
So let's find out how and why with part 2. Because not long into his presidency, we begin to see a number of signs, including the big one. First was the third August 21st eclipse over a continent.
We will need all the help we can get. His powers are growing.
And he stretched forth his hand towards the heavens, and there was darkness throughout the land of Egypt.
Now remember what happened with the first two. They ended a time, times, and a half a time with great fundamental change happening to those areas. So a time, and a half a times would put it anywhere from here in December all the way to Easter. Because the battle in World War I began in December, but had moved for a long time after that. And believe me, we're going to be revisiting that on several occasions.
Well, how would you know?
Because we then have the end of the year 5777, the Feast of Trumpets, and on this day we had, on September 23rd, 2017, the Revelation 12 sign. Revelation 12, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, though a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And this is what actually was announced by NASA up to a few years in advance, that this sign was going to take place, and everything appeared that it was going to be in the right spot, and it did. Now this has happened about 8 or 9 times, but not to this perfection where everything in that scripture is fulfilled. Now this is where the naysayers would come in, because they would also say that you can't always believe what the government tells you or what NASA tells you. But this is where NASA had clearly perfected this entire thing about this and really had nothing to gain out of this. But see, yet there was another sign. There is what was known as a Fujiwara. This is an occurrence between 2 hurricanes, and then 2 hurricanes here, and this particular reason was Hurricanes Jose and Maria, and they did what was known as a Fujiwara. This lasted 6 days and dissipated. They collided, they did the dance and collided on that day and dissipated into nothingness before that day was over with. Now at that time they were meeting at the UN, and Maria had just got done tearing up Puerto Rico before this all took place. And then if you look at their names, Jose and Maria in English is Joseph and Mary. And with this being the end of the year 5777, which the name of God in Hebrew would appear 777.
Well, now, wouldn't you say that was a little coincidental?
Revelation 12:3, and there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns, and upon his heads. Which is this right here. This is Ophiuchus serpens, and this is 7 stars in the head at her feet. Now, what completes the first sign is the fact that Jupiter, the king planet, was in retrograde in the womb of that group of stars. And what retrograde is as we are traveling around the sun, each time we can look at it, Jupiter is going like this and staying within the womb. But also at that same time, the planet Saturn is in retrograde in the thigh of Ophiuchus. Revelation 12:5, and she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. So as you can see, I have a collection of timeline all around, and this is where that sign starts. Repeat this event. So we have 5,777, 3 sevens is God leaving. We have Joseph and Mary dissipating, and then we have the child caught up. So in a perfect pregnancy, you would have a 9-month event, and if we go exactly 9 months, we come to UN Resolution 2334. This occurred on December 23rd, 2016.
Just a couple of months before you took over, the UN, with the support of the United States, passed the UN Security Council Resolution 2334, which held in part that all this space over here, Mount of Olives, Temple Mount, the Western Wall, all of it was illegally occupied territory.
Matthew 24:15, so when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place. Mark 13:14, but when you see the abomination of desolation standing where he ought not to be, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. And so Daniel 12:11, and from that the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. So, again, 9 months before the perfect pregnancy, we have UN Resolution 2334, and that is my abomination of desolation. This is Satan's temple, the UN, the city that rules over the earth. And so understand from that grouping that we have at least 2 timelines that is being referred to at these particular occasions. First, we have the Daniel 12:6, a time, times, and a half time for a fundamental change. But then the Revelation 12 sign, we have the Revelation 12:6 timeline of 1,260 days, and it comes down here to a flyby asteroid called Apophis. Revelation 12:7, and there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And that timeline ended here on March 6th as Apophis. Now, there are some people that would believe that angels are going to come back like aliens. Then at this time, 99942 Apophis was a near-Earth asteroid. But Apophis is the Egyptian god of darkness. But as I have showed you before, we have the meaning of his name here in Luke 10:18. And he beheld unto them, I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. Which, if you remember, in my Revelation 17 beast, the one that is
blood. And the rivers and waters of Egypt ran red and were as blood.
He's here.
And in my opinion, Satan knows that this 2,000 years is done. This is going to take place. So he ends up making all these moves, getting himself into this position to where he can destroy as much of mankind as he possibly can. And so also remember, the Daniel 12:11 timeline also came off of that. And it ends here on April 5th. That is the day after Easter. And also, that is when that National Cures Act was going to get started. And so we have this 30 days between March 6th and April 5th. And let's see what that's about. Revelation 12:13, and when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for a time, and times, and a half a time from the face of the serpent. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. So my board shows somewhat minute details to this, and that seems to be a lot of scripture, but everything here matches.
After what I just saw, I'm willing to go on a little faith here.
Now this is some of the scripture where some people get the idea of, as in the days of Noah. But let me show you what they might really be talking about. During this fundamental transformation that started, as I've said before, sometime here in December, we have a day called Ash Wednesday, which is a repeat of the 40 days that we had here, because 7 days after this was a Day of Atonement, and it was 33 days between these two. So we had a 40-day period here. And Ash Wednesday marks a 40-day period here, February 17th. Genesis 7:11. And in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. Now this is Satan's version of this. And let me tell you, now that he is cast out and lost all his powers, that it's more than just parlor tricks, and we'll find a number of coincidences.
You're going to need a bigger boat.
Because at this point, now that he's cast down, that is all the power that he has.
The great Oz has spoken. Oh, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Because I have a lot more evidence of signs that's going to back all of this up. And you don't have to try to accept it. Because an angel told me to keep it simple, stupid. So what the scripture says, this really isn't different.
No, no different. Only different in your mind. Your
must unlearn what you have learned.
Because during this 40-day period here, we ended up with the election of Joseph Robinette Biden. Revelation 17:11, and the beast that was and is not, even he, is the eighth, and is of the seven, and goeth into perdition. So I have a better, shorter version of this fundamental transformation, but that is called Prophecy for Dummies, the Stolen Election, and this one I need to cover it yet again. So we have these 5 that have fallen, those 5, and then we have the one that is, and the one that is yet to come. And you will see from January 20th to February 13, we had an impeachment of a president that left office. But he taketh to perdition. So democracy and the representative republic ended at that time. And this is an 8th head, but it is of the 7. Now remember, he was his vice president, so it is of this 7, but goeth into perdition, because there is a fundamental transformation of this beast, as foretold by the 3 August 21st eclipses. We have the Revelation 12 sign ending and a fundamental transformation beginning. So now I'm going to show you the fundamental transformation. Revelation 13, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his names the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and the mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. So the dragon gives him his seat and his power and great authority.
And the rivers and waters of Egypt ran red and were as blood.
He's here.
Revelation 13:3, and I saw one of the heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. So with the head that took her to her destruction, we put a sword through it. And there's the head, that's us, the people that voted for him, wounded to death. And now this one here is running the beast. And so remember, this is the wrath of Satan.
Welcome to the party, pal.
Because part of this flood is a open border policy, and turn her into the prostitute.
Yes, you match. My name is Borat. I like you. I like sex. It's nice.
And here, where the Daniel 12:90 ended and the National Cures Act begins, is where he brings his beast out of the water.
Release the Kraken.
But you see, everything is metaphorical, because like the things like Nibiru and all these fantastic supernatural things are just not going to happen. Everything happens on a much smaller scale. And as we continue down just a few months, we get to a 6-day event here. Was a ceasefire over Jerusalem. They were being shelled. And Pentecost in the middle. And at the end of that 6-day period was a super blood moon over this country on May 26th. This is when the Knesset vote was nullified, as Netanyahu couldn't get 31 seats secured in that. He only had 30, and it was all his, because he had gotten 70% of the vote. But it was being thrown out because he needs a unanimous coalition of at least 31 seats. So there was treachery in that election, which is why I think he got 70% of the vote and this one did not. or about 112 million votes. And so they had meetings, and 2 weeks later we had an annular eclipse.
We will need all the help we can get. His powers are growing.
And he stretched forth his hand towards the heavens, and there was darkness throughout the land of Egypt.
And when this vote came in, we ended up with 2 new prime ministers, Yair Lapid and Naftali Bennett, to lead this country. And this is where I get my 2-horned beast of the land. Revelation 13:11, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men.
We've got problems.
And I think what they're referring to here is Iron Dome. And as you can see, I got all these scriptures to match in its own little weird way, and it's not a perfect match, so it depends on what you really want to believe.
No different, only different in your mind. You must unlearn what you have learned.
Because now I'm going to take a step even farther out onto that ledge.
Inconceivable!
Because what if I was to tell you that the 2 leaders thrown out by these 2 apostate governments were my 2 witnesses? Revelation 11:3, and I will give power unto my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the 2 olive trees and the 2 candlesticks standing before the God of the earth.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Prior to when the embassy was moved to Jerusalem here in 2018, we had a blood moon over Jerusalem on a day called, in the Hebkel calendar, Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is a day on the 15th of Shvat, and it is known as the New Year for the trees. It would occur on the halfway point in here. Now the trees would also be the olives. And so 2 consecutive years in a row, see, it's not the exact same day, but it's the same day on the Hebkel calendar, we had 2 super blood moons, this one over Jerusalem and this one over Washington, D.C.
Inconceivable.
Now it would be natural for everyone to think that the 2 witnesses go hand in hand together and the timeline is one single timeline, but that's not what I have.
Only different in your mind. You must unlearn what you have learned.
Because when we run the first 1,260-day timeline on this for what I have is Bibi Netanyahu.
And just like that, the fight's on.
And it ends right here when the Iran talks continue, and this was before the 9th of Av, but he began his role as leader of the opposition.
Ladies and gentlemen, check your enthusiasm at the door.
And even though many of you don't hear it over here, they're trying to throw him in jail and keep him out of the government 100%, just like we have here. So now let's run what I call the Trump blood moon.
Lord bless us, this is going to be a great day.
Now this starts at the very halfway point of his presidency, but as we follow this one on down, we come to the 4th of July.
You won't believe it, We've been invited to a 4th of July party.
Now, this is where the Supreme Court had convened and finalized maybe a day or two before, and there's been a lot of action during those days, and it is something that we're going to revisit because, like I said, there's a lot more timelines tying a lot more things together. So as we continue down from here, we get to our first bit of treachery that happened. A congressional hearing or investigation went into the Wuhan lab and found that all the paperwork had changed on September 12th on what was known as COVID.
What's that?
Antidote. To what? The poison you just drank.
That's not a waiter.
Wuhan's an old friend.
It comes from China. That's why. It comes from China. I want to be accurate. Yeah, please, John. Please. I have great love for all of the people from our country, but as you know, China tried to say at one point, maybe they stopped now, that it was caused by American soldiers.
Because most people don't know that a trade deal was signed 15 days before he began to institute certain policies on this so-called plague. And in that trade deal, the clause was written by Chinese that the whole deal would be null and void if a natural disaster or pandemic. So he was lied to, and the U.S. soldier thing may not necessarily be a false statement by the Chinese. Black & Veatch build biolabs. This one here was in Ukraine.
Blood. And the rivers and waters of Egypt ran red and were as blood.
He's here.
You have to understand, these are 10 men who are like kings. They're just guys. Revelation 6. And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were the noise of thunder, one of the 4 beasts saying, Come and see. And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. Now this is a bow, and this is a bow. And the first definition of a bow is a single thread with 2 loops on each end, like the 2 loops you see here. And in the Greek dictionary, bow means toxin. And the only other reportable event that I have up until the fundamental transformations of those 2 countries is the first signing of the Abraham Accords here on August 13th. Revelation 8:13, And I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice. And so we will revisit that as something, a timeline takes us back to here. But we also have the Biden nomination, and we have a timeline that ran off of that, 1,335 days back to the abomination of desolation. And the week before that was 1,335 days from this, and that was the 21st Century Cures Act. Now, these timelines are a bit more obscure, and I really don't know or think that they mean anything because they don't really match what the Scripture is telling us. But these are things that you can use constantly, and I'll show you some more. For example, I ran all of the timelines in the Bible, times and a half a time, 1260, 1290, 1335, and 42 months, and I found a connection from that date all the way down. The first one here is October 25th, and that was Biden initiating the vaccine mandate. That's a predator, by the way, which befits our apostate president well. So at 1260 days from the moving of the embassy, we have the vaccine mandate. This comes from an OSHA rule about bringing hazardous substance to the workplace. And it was written as OSHA 666. And then a times and a half a time, we ended up with an eclipse of the moon, the longest one since Columbus had set sail. And on that day was the Rittenhouse trial. And of course, 1290 was the Waukesha, and then right after that, Omicron. And I think that reaction in Waukesha was peace being taken from the earth, or at least the beginning of it. But then as we get on down here, we get to, blessed is he that waiteth and cometh 1,335 days, the SCOTUS ruling, reversing the vaccine mandate, is the opening of the second seal, with the invasion of the very suspect country, Ukraine. Now, I called this from the beginning. There is only one party rule now in Ukraine, as they have thrown out all the others. And now I find out that the aid that they were given, they changed some of their policy. Having already been accused as Nazis, they now have adopted same-sex marriage to get more money. And that is one of the biggest objectives that Satan has, is to get man to re-identify as something that they weren't born as in the image of God.
Now, we're fine with chopping limbs off and putting chemicals in their body that forever change them. This is how upside down the world is.
Revelation 6:4, and there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. So the one thing you got to remember is this beast of Revelation 13 has the foot of a bear and the breastplate of a leopard and the mouth of the lion, and it has all these so-called beasts that seem to be coming out of the first three of Daniel that represent also these three horses. And so in my opinion, the fact that I think that's the second seal was Putin reacting to it as he sits on that horse. And that horse is red for communism. Now, it has been said that Russia is a gas station masquerading as a country. And what I believe is the third horse is pushing it. Revelation 6:5, and when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, Come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. Now, when you measure two things with that set of balances, the one thing you will do is reset them. Revelation 6:6, and I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny.
Last year, only about 6% of Germans used wood to heat their homes, but that has changed dramatically. Demand for firewood in Germany has risen so fast that there is none left to buy. You can't get it. So desperate Germans are now cutting their own wood, scouring the forests like their ancestors for sources of heat. Why?
And see thou not hurt the oil and the wine.
The Green New Deal means what it always meant. It means poverty. The French says that his people are facing the end of abundance. He's not talking about himself. He's not facing the end of abundance. None of them are. Macron and all of them understand they will always be rich and always be protected. They know that for certain.
Daniel 7:3, and 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse from one another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second like a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth, of it between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl, and the beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After I saw this in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth, and it devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. That has 10 horns. Revelation 13:2, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. So believe me when I say this beast has manipulated all of it, and this beast is being controlled by Satan, who is this guy.
And the rivers and waters of Egypt ran red and were as blood.
He's here.
And so now we're coming up here to our present times, and I have a lot more connecting to do. And so now that we're all caught up here in 2022, there's a number of signs that occurred this year, and I'm going to show you how all these things begin to connect with a lot of different timelines. And I got real busy here in the command center.
Command center. It's a basement.
So my opinion is the first 3 seals are already open, and we get to a day here on May 15th. This was second Passover, and we had a blood moon. So do you remember the 4 blood moon tetrad? So if we take this date here back 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months, and 6 years, we arrive here at the 4th of a blood moon tetrad. And here is that blood moon tetrad, different picture of the 4 blood moons, but it's called the Lord's perfect sign. Here, that 4th one that we're talking about is a supermoon, and it was seen by all. And remember of this tetrad, the first one was a time times and a half a time to the Revelation 12 sign. So, again, that last supermoon was the 6 year, 6 month, 6 weeks, and 6 day timeline. And what does that mean? In the Strong's Hebrew Concordance, 4 6s means righteousness. So I did a video on this, and I kept saying, be on the watch. On a 40-day, another 40-day period, it got us all the way to June 24th. On that day, the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, ending 50 years, a jubilee, of abortion rights. That night before, a giant sunspot doubled in size 24 hours, and it's pointing right at Earth, and that started here that night before. And so here it is on the timeline. There was also a planetary alignment that morning of 5 planets, all right before.
You won't believe it, but we've been invited to a 4th of July party.
But another meaning for the 4 6s is also justice. And here are the 9 justices. But believe it or not, this connects even more.
After what I just saw, I'm willing to go on a little faith here.
Because 4 3s represent a casting. So if we use 3 years, 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days, we arrive here on the January 21st super blood moon over Washington, D.C. And if you remember, that particular timeline did end on the 4th of July.
Good morning, D.C. Well, it's shaping up to be another beautiful 4th of July weekend. If you've got any big plans, better get started early, because it looks like the traffic is ramping up.
Revelation 11:7, and when they shall have finished their testimony. So for me, the 1260-day prophesying over is over with and their testimony begins.
Go ahead. Make my day.
And these two guys aren't done, not by a long shot, as you'll find out here in a few minutes. Because here soon after we had what was known as a buck moon. This was a super moon, full moon. And on that day was the second signing of the Abraham Accords. This is where the two apostate leaders signed an agreement in addition to the Abraham Accords, but this also reverses back to UN Resolution 2334. The documents they signed, this right here, was a joint declaration, but also includes a Palestinian state. There was 4 more additions to that signing. 1 was on the COVID response. 2 was on sharing medical information. 3 was the technologies. And 4th was technology and military move in the future, which goes back to my 2 beasts. But on the day of this buck moon, if we drop down here, we will see that this was exactly 700 days since the original Abraham Accord signing, of which I had Revelation 8:13.
Well, now, wouldn't you say that was a little coincidental?
On that day, Bahrain, UAE, Israel, and the United States signed the first signing of the Abraham Accords. So I'm not too sure about a 3.5-year timeline on peace and then another 3.5 years on peace being taken from the earth. There are several of these timelines going on. And shortly after, then I have here 88022, which is where for months I've been getting text messages from this number, 88022, to donate to some of, say, the MAGA causes. But on my timeline, 88022 was August 8th, 2022, and that's when the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago. And then we continue down and we get to the Sturgeon Moon. This was the last supermoon of the year and occurred in August. And on that day is when Congress and the Senate came together with the Build Back Better, the Inflation Reduction Act, whatever they want to call it. That is when they got together and ratified that for signing by the apostate president. They've also confirmed Biden plans to hire 87,000 new IRS agents. And why did the IRS buy 5 million rounds of ammo? Revelation 2:10. Fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that ye may be tried, and ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life. And I have actually foreseen that for myself, not a rapture.
Everybody gets dead. It was his turn. Now get your possible.
And so now we're right here, right before September 11th.
This place is cursed.
What is it with you and curses?
And the next set of signs ends in the midterms. Just over 3 weeks before that begins, we have the Chinese election. And if Xi Jinping gets elected, he is emperor, which is why the Taiwan issue is so great. Just over a week later, we have somewhat of a partial annular eclipse.
We will need all the help we can get. His powers are growing.
And he stretched forth his hand towards the heavens, and there was darkness throughout the land of Egypt.
And this is over Europe, Russia, especially Ukraine. Which I think is a great indication that this second seal is going to really take off. And I showed you where the people in, especially Europe, are going bankrupt.
It's going to dump every dollar they have.
All right, let's say it's happened. Let's say you're right. What's the aftermath?
They'll recover. We won't. We don't have their oil reserves. We're looking at the panic of 1837, the panic of 1893, the Soviet famine of 1932.
Hyperinflation.
Bread lines. Rioting.
I know, I get it.
And at first, they'll call it the American crisis, but within about 6 weeks, they're going to start calling it what it is. The Second Great Depression.
Because a week later, we have the Israeli elections. And this is where Benjamin Netanyahu is back on the ticket.
Just like that, the fight's on.
And there's a timeline that comes off of that election, 700 days until a final eclipse on October 2nd, 2024. And that's 3 to 4 days from the end of the Feast of Trumpets, Rosh Hashanah, the end of the year, 5784. But then at the end of this, we get to the midterm, our midterm election. And that night is the last of the blood moons of this year. And when we're getting the results the next day is November 9th.
This is cursed. That is cursed. Give it a rest, will ya?
And there are so many events and signs taking place. This is where I have the fourth seal opening.
When he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast say, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse. And his name that sat on him was Death. And hell followed with him.
And power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth to kill with the sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. And there is a timeline that comes off of that. 666 days, all the way down here to September 5th. All right, what's September 5th? Revelation 12:14. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for a time and times, and a half of time from the face of the serpent. So we take this back a time, times, and a half a time, and that does come down to the March 6th Apophis. So this is where the sheltering will be removed. But as we continue down from this date, we get to a series of signs. And I also have, marking Pentecost here, the 70 weeks found in Daniel that comes all the way down to that same October 2nd eclipse. So I hope you've enjoyed this video.
Boo! Boo!
Because even some of the signs and information that I showed you in part 2 of this video, more information has come to light as to some of the things that actually took place at that time. And so that is why we're going to go to part 3.